a little bit of a, I don't know, maybe a different approach to understanding how you feel about food, or how each of us feels about food, and how it's all different, right? And part of this is important for me to discuss too, in the sense that, you know, you can work with a coach or try a certain food plan, or, you know, like you said, aim to include more vegetables, or, you know, whatever the things are that's coming up for you. And then if ever those pieces become challenging or don't work for you, the better understanding around why that might be, and again, then understanding where your relationship with food comes into play with each of those things that you're working on, is also really important. You know, so it's not just as simple as saying like, Emily, here's your macros, go, you know, or whatever. And so there's more going on, right? So what we're going to do today is dive in a little bit, and I imagine we'll spend, you know, 30 minutes or so chatting about this, and just see if we can better understand a little bit about where you're coming from, and anyone who watches this in the future, for that matter, and see if that helps to better make decisions or adjustments moving forward. So before I just try to explain the whole thing away, let me share my screen. And oh, actually, sorry, one sec. Oh, another person just came in, one sec.
Oh, good.
Yeah. Hello, Sarah.
Hello.
How are you?
Good, dear.
Good, good. I was just telling Emily here, and Jared's going to be joining us in a second as well. Just kind of the background behind this conversation is, the goal is to better understand where each of us is coming from in our experiences around food, so that we can better understand how might be most appropriate to make shifts around our food going forward. So just so you know, now you're in the loop. Welcome. Nice to see you.
Thank you.
Okay, yeah, let me share my screen and we will jump in. So if you guys have a something to write with, that would be cool. And just as a side note, and that could be typing, could be paper, your phone, whatever you're most comfortable with. But I am Sarah, and I am a nutrition coach. This is my company, it's Nutrition for Life Project. And I was just telling Emily before you jumped on, Sarah, that part of my philosophy is that there's more to our interactions with food, or our food plans, or our goals around food, than just eat this, right? We all have different backgrounds and experiences that influence, you know, where we're coming from. So cool. So this is all about exploring your relationship with food and better understanding. This quote here really struck me, and it says, perhaps our most intimate relationship each of us will ever have is not with any fellow member of our own human species. Instead, it is between our bodies and our food. And certainly, this quote is not meant to demean any relationships that you have with other people, or with other connections in your lives, or beliefs that you have. Those are all 100% valid. But a reality is that if we do not eat, we will not live, right? And so this becomes a super, super important piece of all of our lives and our vitality, if you will. So important to keep in mind kind of as we're looking at this. Cool. All right, so the goal of this conversation today is to give us perspectives on our connections with food. It's not necessarily prescriptive around food, so not necessarily saying like, eat this, this might not be right, this is how much, but instead allows us to better understand where you're at in this moment, and allow you to make adjustments moving forward if it makes sense. And just as a side note, down the line in this group, if you want more help, we can get into those prescriptive choices, but this is not necessarily the purpose of this particular conversation. So where we're going to start is what is your current relationship with food? And what I would like you all to do is to just close your eyes for 1 second and think about you and food. So what comes to mind for you? How do you feel about your current connections to food, both physically and emotionally? So like hunger or confident or stressful feeling in my chest, or I don't care at all, or I feel energized when I think about food. Anything like that that's coming up for you, just make a note. Think about where do I feel it in my body? Think about how would you describe that feeling? How often do you think about food? Who influences your connections to food? And what are your current preferences and approaches around food? So I'm going to give you guys 3 minutes right now to take some time to answer any or all of these questions, whatever strikes you, or really anything else that comes up around your connections to food. And I won't talk, but feel free to check out those questions or think about anything else that's coming up for you for 3 minutes. If you have questions, you're allowed to ask me. And this is just for you, so I'm not going to ask you to share this or anything, so feel free to be as honest as you would like. Hi, Jared. We are taking 1 more minute to think about any or all of these questions in connection to how you feel about your food. Feel free to write down anything that comes to mind. Excuse me. Okay, you can wrap up the thought that you have. And now what I want you to do is take 1 minute or less to summarize what you wrote with 3 descriptive words. So pick 3 words that best summarize what you've written here. Or maybe not even best summarize, but what comes to mind first when you think about your current relationship with food? 3 words. Cool. Anybody open to sharing any or all of their words? Go ahead and unmute yourself if you're open to that. It's okay if not, but any or all of your words that you want to share.
I'll share. My 3 words were joy,
social, and real.
Cool. Good. Thank you. Awesome. Go ahead.
I wrote down chest, energy, and colorful.
Very cool as well. Awesome. Okay. From here, where we're going to go is thinking about where did or does these relationships with food come from. And what we're going to do is take 2 or 3 minutes again to think about how you've been influenced, essentially. How have your choices and preferences been influenced in your life? So thinking about maybe where you learned what you did. Maybe it's cultural. Maybe it's from someone else that told you certain things about food. How was food modeled for you growing up, right? What expectations were or are there for you in connection to your food, right? Take a second here and think about these. You could write down anything that comes to mind, but I'm going to give you 2 minutes here to think about this piece. Just about 30 seconds or so. Okay, cool. You can pause where you're at or wrap up your thought. And so this piece here that we've just thought about or wrote down is unique to each of us, right? Is how you were brought up. It's the people that you surround yourself with, both currently or have had interactions with around food in your past, right? And these are the pieces that potentially shape a lot of what, you know, our current decisions around food are used to make, if that makes sense. And so if there are certain things in your current approach to food that you would like to change, if at all, some of these pieces might be worth addressing, right? And this next slide here is nothing you have to write down, but what can we do basically with this information, right? So now that we have a better idea of where our perspectives around food might be stemming from, we can do a few things if appropriate, right? So you need to make this decision for yourself. One might be forgive. And this is a generalized thing, right? But for some of us, other people, other, you know, cultural situations, other geographical locations have influenced the choices that we've made around food, right? And some level of forgiveness might be appropriate on your part. Like, for example, if growing up, my mom said something that made me feel judged for the foods that I was consuming, right? And that has impacted me now to this point in my life. It might make sense for me to forgive her. Maybe not literally having a conversation, but within my own self and heart, right? That she didn't mean to make me feel a certain way. That was an off the cuff statement, or whatever my thought is about this, but some level of forgiveness might be appropriate. Additionally, we can make a decision right now to proceed differently than what we had been taught, right? Or than what we had been given in our lives. And then the reminder that every single decision that you make around food is its own decision, right? So just because I had XYZ for lunch doesn't mean I need to have XYZ for dinner, right? Or this comes up a lot with like, well, I already had, a bunch of chips today, might as well keep eating chips, right? And so these types of decisions, we can give ourselves permission to make different decisions moving forward, right? And this exists both on a macro scale and on that micro scale, like I just referenced about eating chips all day. But on the bigger picture, right, you can decide differently than what you have done so far. I'm giving you permission. You can also decide how you would like to model food, right, for people around you. The conversations that you might want to have around food, the way that you portray yourself in connections with your food. This becomes extra important when you have kids around that are eating with you or around you, and what you put forth around what you're having, right? Additionally, I totally recommend checking in more with ourselves around physical and emotional feelings around food, right? When those cravings come up, or when you want certain foods, or when you're feeling hungry, checking in and making sure that you understand where those things are coming from, like, it's lunchtime, that's why I'm hungry. This makes sense, right? But then equally, we have certain things that come up that are super stressful times, and we're drawn to certain foods, or we're feeling a certain emotion, sadness, extra happy, celebrations that are attached to food, and that we have these certain things come up. Understanding why those things are present for each of us is going to influence how we make choices around food. Equally, are these feelings of physical and emotional hunger, feelings around food, stemming from something that can be helped? And I put this in quoting marks, not like we need to heal ourselves, but there are certain factors that are in existence that we can adjust, right? So maybe it's stress, right? Maybe it's conversations that are weighing on you that need to be had. Maybe it's a lack of sleep that's causing differences in your eating patterns. Maybe something is literally weighing on you emotionally, and that needs to be addressed, right? Any of these factors could be real. And if it is something that you, again, in thinking about where your hunger is coming from, can be shifted, then those adjustments are worth making. And then the last thing here is also thinking about where the holes in our knowledge or food experiences are, and seeing if it makes sense to work to fill those, right? So if part of your experience around food is that you have a lack of knowledge around what types of foods are out there, or what might be a healthy option for you, or how much food you need, right? All of those pieces can potentially be addressed with some digging in knowledge, right? And looking for support if you have holes there. Cool. All right. Now this next piece comes with a thought about moving forward, right? Not that our past is something that we need to escape or anything along those lines. However, how can we create a desired relationship with food for ourselves moving forward? Basically taking control and thinking about what we want it to look like when we move forward. Okay, so what we're going to do is almost proceed in the way that we started, in reverse. So I'm going to have you start with taking 1 minute to pick 3 descriptive words that reflect what you want your connections and relationships with food to be. And with this being said, it is okay if some of those are similar to what you had written before. But like, if you could wave a magic wand and these were the 3 words that came up for you, what would those words be? Go ahead. 1 minute. Cool. Would anyone like to share their desired words? Jump in if you like.
I wrote down 4.
Yeah, that's allowed.
Peace, real, enjoyable, self-control.
Cool. Okay. I like that. I also like the play on, or not play on, but joy and enjoy as being part of your, I don't know if that resonates with you, but I like that.
It was not
Anybody else care? Cool. Great. I like it. Anybody else care to share?
So the words I wrote down are relaxed, enjoyable, and nourishing.
I love that. Nourishing is great. Very good. Thank you for sharing.
You're welcome.
Yeah, I wrote delicious, filling, and dialed.
What was the last one?
Dialed. Like dialed in.
We are in the same room, so trying to prevent some, what's that, echo, whatever. Anyways, thank you for sharing. Very cool. Okay, so now again, continuing with that backtracking, we can think about those same types of questions that we thought about before, except with the thought of what we want to take forward with us. So before you start writing anything down, just take a second to think about this. We're going to dig deeper into those words and what they mean to you, and what that might look like for you. So reflecting on some of the same questions that we started with, except answering with desires. And for the purpose of this moment right here, try not to let the fear of impossibility derail your thinking. So instead of saying like, oh, I couldn't do that, or that's never possible for me in relation to food, just speak or write or think strictly from ideals, right? So some of the questions, what comes to mind when you think about your ideal connections to food? And maybe you bounce off some of those words that you just wrote. Where would you like to feel that relationship in your body? How would you describe those physical feelings? How often would you like to think about food? Moving forward, who will influence your connections to food in the future? Redundant the way I said it, but what are your desired preferences and approaches to food? What would you like to change from where you are now? And then what would you like to gain moving forward? So let's take 2 or 3 minutes and think about any number of these questions, or really anything that comes up for you in thinking about what you would like to move forward with. Go ahead. Another minute or so if you need it. All right, wonderful. Go ahead and wrap up that thought. And certainly I'm giving us a little bit of a time constraint here in our experiences, but if any of these questions are worth coming back to, after this call or certainly in your future and any experiences that you have, please feel free to use them and feel free to share with me if you want to as well. Okay, so now that we have these desires in mind, right, we can potentially make adjustments from where we're at to where we're trying to go. And here are some ideas to consider if there are adjustments that you would like to make, right? So to get closer to this desired relationship with food, some pieces that we can use, number one, and I don't want to say the most important, but a super important one, is being mindful of the words that you use to talk to yourself and others about food. And we're going to come back to this in 1 second on another slide. But listening to yourself in a maybe more tuned in version can help with your own connections to food. And I'll explain more of that in a second. Continue to notice where and when you feel things about food, right? This could be understanding stomach hunger, like physical need for food, and emotional hunger. So that goes back to like the stress eating or celebratory eating even. And not that there's anything wrong with that, but when we start to understand where these various hunger cues are coming from, that can help us better make decisions around food moving forward. And this could quite literally be taking a second and thinking, where am I feeling hungry, right? Is it in my stomach, or is it I'm feeling this excitement in my chest, or mentally I'm feeling drained and so I want ice cream, right? Understanding where these things are coming from helps too. And this is potentially a big one depending on where you're at right now, but trying to create a more inclusive and balanced food plan could help you change your relationship with food, in the sense that eating foods you love in moderation can influence how you see food overall, right? Sometimes restricting foods can actually make us feel negatively towards all foods, right? So, if for example, you say, I'm not going to eat any sugar, right? Or any added sugar, I guess. But this statement, or at least I'll speak personally, if I were to say that, all I would think about all day is ice cream. And then at night, when I typically have a treat or two, I would be worrying the whole night about how I was going to get through the couple hours until I could go to sleep. And so that decision to avoid sugar has a negative impact on my life, right? Whereas if I just had a small amount of ice cream, I would probably feel fine with it. It fits into my overall food plan, and then I could go to sleep without worrying. This is just one kind of extreme example, but I imagine there's a relatable incident maybe for each of us. We can also create and use mantras or statements that help define what you're wanting to become in connection to your food. And one way that we can start with that is using the words that you wrote down in that desired section that we did a couple minutes ago. For example, somebody's word was nourishment, right? Maybe a mantra that you might create is, my food nourishes me. And that can help you make decisions around food. One of them was enjoyment, right? It's, I take the time to enjoy my food, for example. And this is just pulling these out of thin air at the moment, but taking a second to think about what might resonate for you around your food and those words that you chose, so that you can have that thought in your mind as you're making decisions around what you're going to eat, right? Or what to buy, or how to prepare it, etc. And then continue to notice again any undesired feelings that come up around food. Take time to look closely at them and create strategies for how you might support yourself to feel how you'd like to feel. And this is kind of general. However, for example, I'm going to keep using the ice cream example. pretend I ate a whole pint of ice cream and then felt bad about it, right? If I were to then take a second and think, what's making me feel bad about the fact that I ate this pint of ice cream, right? And I might say, you know, I'm literally feeling sick to my stomach right now. It was probably too much, right? I was planning to have that for the entire week and now it's gone, right? So noticing what are the feelings that come up for me can help me better prepare for the future. So maybe I could say, oh, instead of taking the whole pint to the couch with me, maybe I'll serve myself a bowl and not sit in front of the TV while I eat it, so that I have a more mindfully enjoyable experience while I'm having it, right? And these are just experiences from my own life that I'm using, but you make them connect to where you're at, right? Cool. And one more note before we kind of wrap this up around how you talk to yourself around food. This is something that we can start to notice right away. Being mindful that our self-talk and our out loud talk tends to dictate how we feel about ourselves and our actions. And equally, as we looked at earlier, it's possible to influence others by saying things out loud that we may want to rethink or don't actually mean. And here are some examples, right? If we say diet instead of food plan, for me, that comes across as diet, something limiting. I'm trying to not eat as much. It's restrictive. Whereas food plan is focusing on all the things I do want to include, right? So it feels a little bit more freeing. It feels more selective on my part. It feels like my goals are taken into account. And again, these are just my own experiences, but I imagine they connect to others and to each of us as well. Equally, when we use the words like good or bad to describe foods, that can influence how we feel about them as well. I was so bad I ate that whole pint of ice cream, right? How that makes us feel about ourselves or our decisions influences how we move forward. I was already bad and ate the whole pint of ice cream. Why don't I have also 5 beers? I don't know. But I'm already there. Why don't I continue? Is something that can help happen from here. And then like generalizing certain food groups, all carbs are evil, for example, something we want to be careful of. What do you actually mean when you say that? What I actually mean is an overindulgence of carbs can lead to an excess of calories, which can lead to unwanted weight gain. Okay, if that's what I actually mean, then what I'm trying to say is that I want to be more mindful of where my carb intake is coming from, for example, right? What I would urge you to try to do is speak to your health using facts about what you do want, right? So almost that example that I just used about carbs. What do I actually mean when I'm trying to say, and how can I then make adjustments around that if I need to for myself? And then equally start to notice how you're currently speaking to yourself. This can come back to the mantra conversation that we just used, right? Speaking in words that we want to use, and also out loud to others. Cool. All right, last thing here. I would love everybody to literally take a deep breath. Go ahead. Because this whole conversation around food, specifically this one around our own personal connections emotionally to food, is a process, right? And it is likely not something that's going to shift overnight. And if it does, amazing. I'm really happy for you about it. But if not, that's okay. And that is normal. Right? However, simply being mindful of these pieces will start to influence your realities. What I would recommend if you do want to make changes is to start small. Pick 1 or 2 pieces that we've discussed today that you would like to focus on, and focus on those for a couple weeks until it feels almost normal, right? Find ways to remind yourself of them, hold yourself accountable, whatever that means to you. And I'm not even talking about changing what you're eating at this point. I'm simply talking about our own connections emotionally to food. So maybe it is setting a reminder on your phone every day, 11 a.m. It goes off and it says, read your mantras out loud. And it's, my food nourishes me, right? I find enjoyment in what I eat, or whatever it is that came up for you. And also know that we, as a little community here in this Alignment Amplifier group, will keep working on these various approaches to food, specifically over the next 8 weeks, right? And within that also we'll have some actual food related conversations with recommendations around things that you might want to consider including. And then equally, please reach out if there are deeper conversations that you would like to have or more support that you're desiring, and we can address that as well. So that is all I have. I would love to hear from anyone who wants to share anything. Otherwise, yeah, that's it. Relationships with food, intense. Cool. Anyone have any thoughts or questions, comments?
I guess I'll bring up one thought. When I because it's kind of a positive, like when I think about my pastor, like being raised, eating out was like a special thing. It was a treat, fun, you know. So I have like positive, you know, thoughts around like the excitement of food, I guess. And like same can be said for social settings, you know. It's when you get together with friends, food is usually a big part of that, you know. So it's always like this fun, happy thing. And so I'm like wondering if there's some way in my head that I need to like just pull some reins back on that thought, because maybe it's what is the difference for me between just like filling up one plate with all the fun, you know, with my appetizers and grazing on it all night long, you know?
Yeah. Yeah. And no, I'm sorry, I didn't catch that last part.
Oh, I just said I'm just sharing kind of a random thought.
No, I mean, it's real. And again, I think it comes back to that attachment you have with those specific things, right? Because hypothetically, if it was, you know, oh, you got all A's on your report card, let's go out to dinner and celebrate, right? If your connection to something is celebratory, then that can influence the choices that you make at that meal, right? I think equally, frequency of those things matters, because if that going out to dinner is, you know, twice a month that you're having something a little bit more indulgent, then great, maybe that's not a big deal. If this is a weekly or multiple times, you know, a week conversation, then yeah, maybe you give yourself permission to make slightly different choices. And then to your point about like the appetizer conversation, that's real, right? And that might be a thing where it's spending more time to really enjoy the bites that you're taking, so that it doesn't become like mindlessly filling our plates in our mouths just because it's available, right? Whereas if you took 2 bites that you were like, damn, that was good, right? Then maybe you could be all set. But so I imagine in both of these instances, it is a matter of like literally checking in with your own feelings around it, and making the decision about the experience that you want to have. How do you feel about that?
Very good.
Cool. Yeah. Thank you for sharing that too. I think that's a thing that has come up for many of us, right? Is the way that different experiences influence the choices that we make. Yeah. Thank you.
You can kind of anticipate the summer too with as things get a little socially, we're able to be more social, you know, as the year progresses. I could see a lot more opportunities for that. So thank you.
Right.
Appreciate your thoughts.
Yeah. And again, that might just be making the decision about what you want to do in advance, right? I'm going to really enjoy this summer party, and I'm going to have this many cookies or whatever, you know, and thinking about it before you even jump into that situation. Yeah, cool. Thank you. Anybody else have any thoughts or anything to share about your experiences in this conversation? Cool. So I'm gonna post this recording in the event for this, if you feel the need to revisit or anything like that. And if there's anything else that came up for you or that you would like to share or ask questions about, please don't feel shy to reach out. And as I mentioned, we'll continue conversations along these lines in different veins over the next couple of weeks as well. So keep an eye on the events page as well. Cool. Thank you all so much for your time, and I hope you have a lovely rest of your day.
Awesome. Thank you. You too.
Thank you. Thanks, Sarah. Nice to meet you as well.
Nice to meet you too. Thank you so much. Bye bye.
Yeah, of course. Bye.